Alright, so I got cut off in my previous video, picking up where I left off. We had just interpreted the p-value, and to finish up the conclusion, we end by making our final decision about what we should conclude in this hypothesis test. And in order to do that, we are going to compare our p-value with the significance level. So this last part here, this is our decision or conclusion based on the p-value and the significance level. So here, because 0, which is our p-value, is less than 0.05, our alpha, we decide that we reject the null. And we do have convincing evidence that the peak global temperatures increased in the 1900s. And I'm going to highlight that real quick because this should look a little bit familiar to you. This sentence is basically just restating what I had highlighted in green before, right? That is the question that we were investigating. I restate that and I put context to the alternative hypothesis when I make my conclusion. I conclude what our final findings are, what we are convinced is true. Okay, so moving on to the important ideas. The first one is all about these mean difference tests. And so remember that we are doing, the name of the procedure is a one sample t-test for mu sub difference. But really, it is the same as a one sample t-test for mu. Like, it's the same process, the same ideas. The only difference is that the data that I'm studying comes from matched pairs and the difference between those pairs. But still, I approach it the same way I do a one sample t-test for mu. The t-score formula, the specific formula here, is the x-bar subdifference minus mu subdifference over standard deviation subdifference divided by the square root of n. And when we use our calculator for this, we can do TCDF or we can do a t-test. The only thing is, if you use t-test rather than TCDF, your calculator uses a different degrees of freedom than we do. Not necessarily for the t-test, but for a difference from yesterday. So just make sure that if you plug it into your calculator, that you are accurately representing the values that your calculator gives you, right? If it says for some reason it changes degrees of freedom to 32.1, well, change it on your picture to 32.1. So just make sure that you have it very clear on your paper which method you're using. All right, now we've learned today about the mean difference, and we learned yesterday about a difference in means. But how do I really tell what type of problem I'm dealing with? So today's mean difference problem, that is a paired t. We pair up the objects in our sample or in our study. We find just the differences between those, and we collect that as our data. So what will it look like if you have a paired t problem? You will have simply one sample. So such as today, in the problem we were given, we were only given one sample mean and one standard deviation. So the data are paired, and we collect just one sample from the differences of each pair. A paired t will say that we are finding the mean difference sometimes, right? We are looking for mu sub difference. We're looking for the average of all the differences. Those words would also help you tell that it is a paired t-test. And the big difference is that we, for a paired t-test, are going to first subtract in our pairs, and then we're going to take those differences and average them. All of this is compared to a two-sample t-test, and that's what we did yesterday. So this is where I have two independent samples or groups. So I've got two different populations, and they are two independent samples set apart from each other. In a paired t-test, they you have the same N for each. So like even if I have two populations, I would take 32 juniors and 32 seniors and match you each up with your pair. In a 2-sample T, we have 2 different sample sizes sometimes, and that's okay because we have 2 different populations. It is the difference of means, so you'll hear about mu1 minus mu2. And our approach is to first find the average of the 2 different populations. So the average of juniors and the average of seniors, and then subtract those 2 averages. So moving on to the check your understanding, these next 3 questions ask you to decide between those 2 options we just talked about together, the paired T and the 2-sample T. So reading question 1, 2, and 3, see if you can determine what type of test it is and explain why you believe it is that type of test. If you have any questions about the check your understanding or anything we learned today, please let me know. We will talk to you later.